What is up, everyone? Today we're going to upgrade a system, or rather completely rebuild a system that I put together 11 years ago. So my parents' PC that they've been using for the last 11 years, I built back in around early 2013. It's my first ever APU based build, socket FM2, so the new generation of AMD APUs. This is the A8 5600K, 3.9 gigahertz max turbo clock, which is really sweet. It's a black edition, and isn't it crazy that this little guy can run, where's the little picture? Yeah, there it is. Can run IMNC. Isn't that crazy? So I checked out the video earlier just to refresh myself. There are a couple of parts. That was a long time ago, so brace yourselves if you go back and watch that video. But, you know, the basics are all there. That was a lovely little system. It was such an interesting time for AMD specifically. Their mainstream platform, their AM3 CPUs, were in a really kind of bad place. Bulldozer had just come out, there were all these promises, and you know, it kind of sucked. And that was fairly obvious. I mean, it didn't completely suck. There were decent budget builds to be had with the Bulldozer CPUs. But AMD had this other line and a different socket, these APUs that went into the FM2 socket, and they were really quite nifty little chips because they were super powerful in combination with the graphics. You couldn't really get anything for that kind of price on the Intel side that was that capable. And for a small window of time, it was a really good little choice for systems like that. Kind of everyday use, budgety sort of systems. And you know, 11 years later, my parents are still using that PC every single day. Yes, it's time to upgrade it, and that's what we're doing today, but they're still using it every single day. So that little APU has done so well. But I think when we start talking about the new CPU and comparing it to the old one, it'll become really clear just how outdated that chip now is and how much of a boost this upgrade will be. So there are a couple of options when it came time to upgrade this system. I did quickly look at a RAM, CPU and storage upgrade for the existing platform. So I think there are two CPUs that are more powerful that were compatible with the motherboard that is in the machine already. And of course we could upgrade the RAM and upgrade the storage. Once we did all that and kind of added it up with eBay prices, it didn't really make a lot of sense. The system would have consumed more power because compared to today's CPUs, they are really not power efficient for the performance you get. And it wouldn't have been a very fast, noticeable upgrade for the money spent. In fact, it would have been near pointless other than the additional storage. You probably really wouldn't have felt that much difference around the system, in all honesty. So an overall platform upgrade is definitely needed in this situation, I think. And we're going to bring my parents all the way up from Windows 7 to Windows 11. And of course, they'll be a lot safer on Windows 11, and it's just completely necessary to do that now. So it's going to be a huge leap of multiple generations. I think we should take a look at the parts we've got, and then as we go over the parts, we'll kind of try and compare to the old parts. I don't have the system here, but later on in the video, we'll have the system here to tear apart and then fit all of this new stuff in the existing case with the existing power supply, because the case and power supply are completely fine. So here's our nice little collection of parts, and as you can see, just within that one frame there, you can tell the exact path I've decided to take, the exact choices I've made. We'll talk through it all anyway, but most of you will know what was running through my head when I chose these parts just by looking at them. So first of all, the most important choice, and the choice that kind of dictates the rest of the hardware, that is our CPU. Now we've stuck with AMD for the simple fact that this system is already on AMD and it's lasted 11 years. It's a no-brainer to go AMD again. I don't see any need to jump ship and go to the blue team. Don't get me wrong, I don't completely dismiss it. In fact, I've built systems for family members and actually done a build on the channel 7 or 8 years ago when AMD didn't really have any viable CPUs for this kind of tier of system, and Team Blue was the better choice at the time. But at the moment, I feel that there are a huge range of choices from AMD. So we've gone with the Ryzen 5 4600G. Now this was quite a tough decision. I dismissed AM5 almost instantaneously because I believe that AM5 isn't at a point where it's suitable for a budget build. If I was looking at something like an 8500G or an 8600G, I'd be spending at least double, if not triple the amount of money on these parts to get up to that newer platform. And for me, that's just not worth it at all. So a slight difference between this build and the previous build, when we put together that APU system, granted, yes, the APU was essentially brand new. It was maybe a 6-month-old chip. But with this CPU came out 4 years ago and it had a retail refresh in 2022. This is Zen 2 architecture, obviously on the AM4 platform. It is older by today's standards, but for a budget build, I still think AM4 is the correct choice. And you cannot argue with the cost. This guy I picked up brand spanking new, straight from Amazon, next day delivery on Amazon Prime, the works, for £79. This is one hell of a lot of CPU and GPU performance in one package for £79. Now, just before recording, I had a quick look. It is currently listed for £84 on Amazon, but it goes up and down, obviously. £79 when I bought this. That is a great deal. So this CPU is a 6-core CPU, 12 threads, 3.7 gigahertz. It'll also boost up to 4.2 gigahertz. It has 8 megabytes of L3 shared cache, and of course the Radeon Vega 7 graphics. So all of those specs absolutely annihilate the APU that was in the previous system. So in the system right now is an A8 5600K. That is of course on the FM2 socket. It's ancient by today's standards. It's on the Trinity architecture, which was released in 2012. Whole lot of APUs back then. This was kind of like 70-80% the way up the product range. I could have chosen a lower chip at the time, and I'm really glad I didn't because it's clung on this long, and I think that extra speed has really helped. It's a 4-core, 4-thread processor, 3.6 gigahertz, boosts up to 3.9, 4 megabytes of L2 shared cache with Radeon HD 7560D graphics. So everything about this is so much newer, faster, and better. And one huge thing as well, the energy saving is going to be massive with this PC. My parents run a business and they use their PC every single day, I presume for multiple hours. The TDP of their old chip is 100 watts, and the TDP of this chip is just 65 watts. So bearing in mind there's no GPU, there's no spinning disks in the system, you're basically running this and a couple of fans, and that's about it. Everything else is just sat on the motherboard. This is going to be a really energy efficient machine. Their existing machine is really energy efficient, but this is going to be so much more power for the energy that they're actually burning. So that's incredible. If you imagine the old system lasted 11 years, let's say best case scenario, they get 8 or 9 years out of this system, that additional 35 watts of energy saving across that entire time is colossal. So CPU wise, I feel like we've taken a really similar path. Just like last time, I could have chosen a lower end APU, and in fact I remember comments from the time saying that very same thing. I could have gone lower end at the time. There were sort of 2-core, 4-thread options available that would have been just fine in 2013 and in 2014, but that APU has lasted all the way to 2024, and I think it's the same story with the 4600G. I could have gone with a 4300G. I even looked at Ryzen 3 3200Gs, all sorts, but this guy for 79 quid I think was an excellent choice. So that is our CPU and our graphics for this system, which is going to be absolutely fine. Memory, let's do memory next because this is nice and easy. This is a no-brainer. We've got DDR4 on this system, of course, because this is a socket AM4 machine. We've gone with 2 8GB sticks of Corsair RAM, 3200 megahertz. Your bare basic, tried and tested. I've got this stuff in my machine. Funny thing is, the memory is the only thing that I've had to fiddle with, well, other than adding a hard drive a few years ago because I didn't have enough storage on the puny little SSD that we put in all those years ago on that system for my parents. The memory is the only other thing we had to change, and we had to change it pretty much instantly. I remember at the time I messed up the order and I ended up with one single 4GB stick. I thought I was buying 4 1GB sticks back then. That was a pure mess up on my part. So I ended up putting in 2 sticks of 2GB at the time. And we'll see that when we get the system in later. But of course, we're going to be running dual channel RAM here as well, and much faster RAM. I believe their current memory is DDR3 1333 megahertz. So you can see the kind of generational leaps. Nice thing about this as well is that system back then, I could have gone with a hard drive, but I didn't. I went with a SATA SSD, and I think that is one thing that has allowed the system to stay as snappy as it has all this time. If it was on a hard drive from day one, it would be a dog right now. So there's an SSD in the existing system. Granted, it got too small, so storage is now on a mechanical disk. So we're going to move all the storage over to an SSD. And of course, we are now going to be rocking an NVMe M.2 SSD, which is a nice upgrade over a SATA SSD, and certainly a lovely upgrade over a SATA mechanical storage drive. So we've gone with the Crucial P3+. This drive is always an excellent deal. And just like the previous build that I did, yeah, we could have chosen cheaper memory, we could have chosen cheaper storage, but it was all about getting the name brand, tried and tested stuff, just like the PSU, you know, get the Corsair PSU rather than the cheapo thing, get all the decent stuff, and it'll last a nice long time. We're going for the exact same thing with this. So we got the P3+, 500 gig, I'm thinking, not that I've really checked, I'm thinking should be enough, because currently I think we've got 120 gig SSD in that machine and a 500 gig mechanical drive, and I very much doubt that mechanical drive is anywhere near full. The bulk of my parents' storage is photos, so it takes a long time to fill up the space with photos with the amount that they have. I would think, I'm guessing, I hope 500 gig is enough. Surprisingly, at the time of purchase for this, I couldn't just whack it up to a terabyte because it did make a significant price difference. Storage is strange, it kind of fluctuates. Sometimes going up to a terabyte for the hell of it makes sense, other times it doesn't. This time it did not make sense. So there's the storage. And then last but not least, we've got our motherboard. And again, same old thing. I'm like a broken record. We went with a Gigabyte ultra durable board last time. It's lasted 11 years. It's been perfect. And we're going with a Gigabyte ultra durable board this time. I use what I know, guys. And it's really hilarious because in the last build that I recently did, which was the beige build, if you haven't checked out that video, go and check it out. In that video series, I drifted from my Gigabyte path, because as you guys know, nearly every single build that I've done on the channel for the last 15 years has been based around a Gigabyte board. We drifted from that path, we went with an MSI board, and what happened? It was dead on arrival, and it took us 4 episodes to figure that out. So we're sticking with Gigabyte. I love Gigabyte boards. I kind of know Gigabyte back to front, and they always work for me. Now that I've said all that, I really hope this board isn't DOA, but the board itself, the A520M S2H, is just your nice basic budget board. I've got an A320 board in the beige build next to me. That's a nice board. Lower end, of course, you're not doing anything crazy with these, but they do everything that you need a motherboard to do. They fit the CPU, they fit the memory and storage, and everything is just gonna work. So this is basic budget stuff, but good quality stuff. So let's dig right in and take a look at our motherboard. We are not going to need anything other than the I/O shield out of this box. SATA cables can stay where they are. Kind of cool, they put Gigabyte on the bag. That's nice. So let's pull out the lovely fresh motherboard. As you can see straight away, lovely basic stuff that we all know. So here's the board. It's got all of the basic I/O you'd want. One thing that seems to be really nice about this board is we've got all of the display options pretty much. So even if you're running an older VGA monitor, this is a budget board, of course, maybe someone is refreshing their platform and they're still on VGA, that's absolutely fine. You can just obviously connect straight to VGA. You've got DVI for a similar reason. Maybe they're on a DVI monitor, but then if you do have a newer monitor, you've got your HDMI port there. So that is all well and good. I like to see that. You've got plenty of USB, and then you've still got your PS2 just in case, network and audio. That is nice and simple. Rest of the board, you've got a few slot options here, but most importantly, we have our lovely M.2 slot for our SSD. So that's as simple as we're going to get on here. We've got place to put our drive, place to put our memory, and of course our CPU socket. Speaking of CPU, let's dig in to this lovely 4600G. We'll be using the stock cooler, of course. I didn't use the stock cooler last time. I repurposed the cooler that came with my Phenom 2 CPU back in the day, my Phenom 2 955 Black Edition, because those coolers were just a little bit beefier than the coolers that were coming with the APUs. We get our little Ryzen sticker there in the packet, and there's our 4600G. This is going to be one hell of an upgrade. AM4, as simple as it's always been. Triangle to triangle. Drops into the socket nicely. Little reassuring wiggle, and we'll lock that socket into place. Now I'm fairly certain the stock hardware has got to come off this board for our cooler to mount. I was actually kind of staggered when I was researching this system. I was staggered at how little sense it made to go for an AM5 system. Again, it's really easy to get caught up in the future-proofing bug. If you start thinking about the future of the system and how long is it going to last, how long is it going to be quick enough, you really want to lean towards those newer CPUs. Then you start to research, say for instance this 4600G versus one of the much newer AM5 CPUs, and you look at the difference in the scores and you think, oh man, look at that. Just look at that. You know, I've got to go for one of these AM5 CPUs. But then you look up the difference between this and the 5600K, the A8 5600K that's in their system right now. And there is a gigantic, huge leap that it makes the difference between this AM4 CPU and an AM5 CPU look completely minute. You know, you've got a Grand Canyon of performance difference between the old system and this system. So as soon as you do that, it changes everything. And then I found that during my research, I started to get a little bit more sensible. And then I saw AM4 as more viable once again. So here we go, here's our cooler. And the other thing that kind of made sense as well was the fact that when I really thought about it, I realized that if I was going to build this system for myself, I would also choose the AM4 platform right now. You know, maybe in a couple of years that would be different, but right now, I would definitely choose the AM4 platform for myself. And a lot of that is just because of cost and I guess availability. Oh, by the way, of course, pre-applied thermal gloop that we'll just leave on there because that'll be absolutely fine. A lot of that with AM5 comes down to the cost. And it's not just the CPUs, it's about the range of motherboards as well. The amount of choice that you have on AM4 is incredible, and the value offering on AM4 as well is just fantastic because of the price difference with the CPU and motherboard combined. The fear when tightening these is a different kind of fear to the AMD coolers that have the lever, because with the lever you get kind of a 1.5, maybe 2 second moment of when you're doing that, you're like, no. But then with this, it's less fear, but it's kind of prolonged across this period where you're screwing it in, just because of how tight you have to crank it. Beautiful. We're cranked on all those, and now straight away, we're going to rotate this fan so it's the right way up. So that's the fan now turned around the correct way. And let's plug her in. CPU fan in. Now on my A320 board, there's only one case fan header. I can't remember how many case fans is in the Core 1000. Possibly only one fan header. Oh no, there's two fan headers on here. I can see one here and one here. So if there's one in the back, one in the front, we are good to go. That's nice. So that's that. We can tuck that away somewhere when this is in the case. Looking at our memory next, two lovely fresh sticks of brand new DDR4. We went with 3200 megahertz. Oof, one. Man, there is only just clearance there. With the AMD stock cooler. That's crazy. That you're pushing that up against the cooler to get that one in. There is two. As easy as that, 16 gigs populated on this board. Next up is storage. Crucial, P3+. I'm starting to have doubts about my capacity choice, but I'm really hoping when we get the system back here, plug it in, if we see just 200-300 gigs used, then we're kind of laughing. Again, a massive upgrade going from the SATA SSD to this guy. In she goes, and then small screwdriver for this, definitely. Oh, my bad. My bad. There's already a screw in the standoff. There we go. And that's our drive secure. So, would you believe that's the system built? How wild is that? That is it. There is nothing else going in here. So obviously we don't have the CX430 here yet because that's still in the PC, which is currently being used. So I've got my trusty Seasonic power supply here. 350 watts, which is more than enough for this well below 100 watt system. We're going to use this for now because that's kind of the beauty of this, is I can take my time doing all of this. I can install Windows, get everything tested and working properly, and then the swap itself can be nice and quick because the system is basically all set up and ready to go. So there we go, that's the power supply plugged in. That's the only two connections we need to plug in. We've got the 8-pin and the 24-pin. We'll plug this into power, And I'll also get some keyboard, mouse and monitor so that we can instantly test this brand new system. Okay, so we're all plugged in. We've got HDMI. I'm not too sure what my mum and dad are running display-wise in terms of the cable, but I know what display they have and I know it's got HDMI. So when I deliver this system, I'll make sure to include a HDMI cable because I think they could still be running VGA out of that old motherboard. Possibly I did something like DVI to VGA, I'm not too sure. But anyway, we're going HDMI and that's how it'll be on the final setup as well. Keyboard and mouse plugged in through USB extensions, hence why this is looking a little janky. And then we've got the power supply. So power supply is already switched on. All we need to do is switch on the PC. Let's go, power. Power LED, power button. So we got fan spin and fan spin. Nothing from the keyboard and mouse or display yet, but we'll give it a minute. This is the very first boot with this hardware installed. That memory slot didn't quite click there. There we go. I've been known in the past not to slot my memory in all the way, and then you guys pointed out to me later on when I've been struggling with the system for hours. Here we go. Press Y to reset FTPM. Y. Oh, hang on a sec. We've got nothing from keyboard now. Hang on a minute. Let's see. What's that? Mouse. Okay, we're going to turn... No, okay, we got our keyboard. Got our keyboard back. There we go. Okay, cool. Y. Okay, we haven't got keyboard, so we can't press Y. We had keyboard to begin with, but we didn't then afterwards. Boot her up again. Man, this system's going to be so quiet. Maybe I should have looked to replace the case fans as well, because the case fans may be a little loud by now. I've probably got spare 120mm fans here, but I didn't even think of that. Okay, do you know this keyboard extension could be tripping us up here because it's miles long. Yeah, that's probably not good. Let's plug the keyboard straight in. It's because I've put my new PC all the way over there in the corner. I use that extension. Oh man. Let's try a keyboard in a different port. Let's just try these USB 2 ports over here, or what appear to be USB 2 at least. This may work. No. Man, I was expecting that to work. Let's power this system up again. I get a little bit of light from the keyboard initially. Got a feeling we're gonna need to dig out that PS2 keyboard. Yes, that worked. Okay, restarting with the keyboard in a USB 2 port. I'm really glad about that because I know that I've got a PS2 keyboard, but I know it's in the attic, and I know that I've got a PS2 to USB adapter, but of course, where it is another question. BIOS has been reset. Let's plug the mouse back in now. Now that we've fully posted, yeah, shouldn't matter what USB ports we're in. Sweet. So we're gonna load optimized defaults, then reboot. Let's see how she goes. Boot looks good. Very quick Gigabyte splash screen. And hey, we're good to go. Okay, yes, I forgot to press delete to get into the BIOS. Nicely done. Let's just do a quick reboot. Haha, here we are. Beautiful, everything is detected. We have got our one spinning CPU fan, no system fans, of course. There's our storage drive, there's our two memory modules, and we have our CPU, of course, running at 3.7 gigahertz, which is nice. Memory frequency is incorrect, 4600G with Radeon graphics. Jump into advanced mode. We're just gonna enable XMP really quickly. Lovely, that's sorted. So BIOS is from August of 2023. There's most likely an update or many updates. I think it's a good idea to update to the very latest version before we even begin to think about installing Windows. So luckily I've got two handy USB sticks. I have got my newly acquired Windows 11 USB, and I've got this spare USB stick as well for the BIOS, and we'll get that updated. But obviously at this stage, we can see that everything is working beautifully, at least up to here, which is really nice. Everything is recognized. So far, so good. Okay, so we're on to day 2 2 of this, and we're going to start off nicely with a lovely Windows install. Here we go, so that's the system powering up. I know I've been setting up a few captures lately for some videos, but we're going to go purely old school on this one. Going to fit the vibe nicely. Windows 11 USB stick is in a USB 3 port, and I'm going to attempt to do a no network install. English United Kingdom, install Windows 11. I agree everything will be deleted. I don't have a product key quite yet. We're going to go Windows 11 Pro on this guy. So we've found 2 disks, of course. We found the SSD and the USB drive. We're going to install on the SSD. I don't bother with the whole create a partition thing. A couple of people were asking in my previous video, because when you press next on a blank drive, it'll just create the required partitions for you anyway. The installer's got to do that, otherwise it wouldn't be able to install. Install Windows 11 Pro and keep nothing. And here we go, installing Windows 11. So we have what appears to be our first reboot. Gigabyte splash screen, installing, cool. Please keep your computer on, I will. Here we go with another restart. Oh, we're already up 94%, in just a moment. Man, this is speedy. All brand spanking new hardware, relatively new USB drive, freshly created USB 3.0. Everything is just so speedy to install an OS these days. And here we go, into the dreaded part of the installer, the horrible fancy bit that I hate. United Kingdom. Let's connect to a network. No, thank you. That was weird. Wouldn't let me type in the command prompt for a minute. Did the slash the wrong way around. Nice. Backslash, forward slash. I really hope this works this time around. I had trouble with the no network install on my last build. I don't have internet. Sweet. That's awesome. So I think the problems last time that I was having were related more to the instability of that build overall than the Windows thing, because that no network install worked absolutely fine. It's almost crucial for a situation like this to install without a Microsoft account. It's just another thing to go wrong. It's another thing to tie yourself to, that if you get locked out of the system, it's that much more complicated, or it's just unnecessary management, more passwords to remember, more things to remember. So it's nice when you give a system to somebody, if you're doing this kind of build and you're giving it to someone and you just want it to work, having the local account is so much better. So what I'm going to do now is connect the network. That way I can just let Windows get all its updates, get any drivers that are still outstanding. All that would probably take a good while, so I'll just let it sit here and do that. Then I need to activate Windows, of course, and also I want to really strip back Windows 11, get rid of some of this nonsense, bearing in mind that my parents are coming from Windows 7. I want to get rid of a lot of this just stupid bloat. Well, I say bloat, that's not really the right description. Just get rid of some of the more frilly parts of the OS that are just completely unnecessary for day-to-day use, and just make it a nicer experience. Here it is, the build itself, all the way from 11, 12 years ago. Still looking good. This is such a nice case. I'd forgotten how nifty and compact these cases are. This is the Core 1000. They then did the Core 1100. We built a system in that case as well, and that's got a different front design. I think it's a solid front panel, whereas this one is kind of the honeycomb look. The optical drive seems to be kind of pushed in. I can't remember how that's mounted, so we'll check that out and see if we can realign that, or maybe that's just how it is, I'm not sure, but it does appear to be in too deep. Nice I/O here on the side. We don't really need to take it apart yet. We need to boot it up and extract the data and extract some settings and other bits and bobs. Basically just have a look at how it's set up so that I can replicate the new system almost identically. But I can't really hold off. I really want to dig into it and have a look inside. Back panel is looking good. There's no exhaust fan, so we went with the positive pressure approach for this case. We just mounted the front intake 120mm, and that'll probably be just fine. In fact, it'll definitely be just fine for the new system, which is lower TDP. And this board as well has the 3 connections, HDMI, DVI and VGA. So why on earth did I keep VGA for this setup, I wonder? Maybe it was just as simple as that was the cable that was running into the old monitor, because it was previously just a VGA monitor. You know, VGA is fine. It puts a picture on the screen and it looks just great. You can't tell the difference. But we'll get HDMI on the new system. Okay, so This isn't the first open up since we built it. Good few years ago we made a video, quite an unpopular video of mine actually, where I fitted a hard drive to this system. It was during a time where I was a little bit slapdash in my approach, for want of a better word. And I didn't have the proper mounting screws. I didn't have really a plan going into it, but more storage was needed. So I whacked in the drive, and where is it? Yes, we ended up mounting it here. That's where we put the drive in. So we're not going to fiddle with any of this too much. So a closer view of the top reveals that the way I mounted the optical drive last time was not entirely correct, because I've gone with the bottom holes here. We can get that flush with the front panel if we just push it forward and use the next available hole, which makes a lot more sense than what I originally did. So we can get that lined up nicely at the front. Not that it makes any difference at all, but we'll make that little adjustment. The hard drive is not staying, of course, that will go. And we're down into the only part of this case that I never liked, and I don't think they improved it for the Core 1100. I'll have to look back at my video and see. I've never liked this, the drive mounting mechanism. I think it's cool that it's on thumb screws. It's convenient. We won't take it out now because I don't want to mess anything up. We know the system's working. We still need it to work to get the stuff off. Yeah, just never really liked it. It'll take 1, 2, 3 2.5-inch drives, and it will take 2 3.5-inch drives by the looks of it. And I get the idea. There's some width with this case. So if you've got a long GPU, you can still put a long GPU in here and the drives don't interfere with it, or there's potential for the drives not to interfere. Whereas if you had more traditional drive bays, 3.5-inch bays along the front, you would then be restricted on the length of GPU you can put in the case. So I do completely understand that approach. I've just never really liked it. Other than that, the case is completely flipping solid. It's still got the top-mounted PSU, which is nice in a micro ATX case. It's just bare basic. You know exactly what you're getting. Looking a little bit deeper in here, we'll take it apart properly later, but yeah, you can see my old Patriot signature RAM lurking in there. This is the SATA cable that we had to add to get that hard drive up and running. And then of course, no GPU. This is the cooler from my Phenom 2, with the slightly beefier design with the heat pipes on it, as opposed to the cooler that would have originally come with the APU. It's pretty much going to be a like-for-like swap, a like-for-like build. Trip down memory lane is fun, but not very productive. So I'm gonna put the side back on this and we'll get it powered up. So angles are gonna suck for a minute, but we're just checking everything out. Here we go, let's power her up. Obviously I know the computer works just fine. It's been in use every single day. So that's good, there's no troubleshooting involved with getting the data off. We can just really easily do that. Ah, glorious, good old Windows 7. So just having a listen to the fan here at the front, it's still quiet, but there is a slight crunch there. There is definitely a slight crunch. I did everything to the extreme back in the day. Windows 7 Ultimate. Ooh, yeah. Okay, no license. Naughty, naughty. You know, I can't even remember what method I would have used to acquire this operating system back then, but whatever it is, it has run out. It is no longer valid. So this has been popping up for the last couple of years as far as I know, which is not ideal. It's going to be a real treat to have this all new and fresh. Yes, we know Microsoft. I'll do a nice blur on the screen because there's a lot of files here. But at least you guys got to see a quick little Windows 7 boot up. That was a nice treat. So my plan is I'm going to copy all this data over to one of my servers, and then I will copy it back onto the new system. I don't really have to worry too much because all this data is still going to be here on the old drive. So worst case scenario, if something went pear-shaped, I can just plug these drives into the new system and transfer data that way. That would actually be fine and a perfectly acceptable thing to do, and it would negate this entire step, but I do want to take a backup of all of these files. Oh man, it must have been so frustrating for them to get these pop-ups constantly. And you know, everything is ancient, isn't it? I should have done this a couple of years back, I think. I should have sorted this out, but never mind, we're doing it now and it'll be good. So this is how we're looking for storage. The SSD is nearly full. I don't quite know why it's so full because all of the user folders are on this hard drive. And as you can see, we've got plenty of room on there. We've got barely any data to copy over. This, I thought it was a 500 I put in. I must have put a 320 gig drive in by the looks of this. But I need to just quickly go through this drive and make sure that there's nothing. There could be like Dropbox folders or something like that But I'll go through everything and yeah, just take a bulk copy. So that's all the important stuff done. We can now just tear the system apart or carefully take it to pieces. We'll make a start here, but then I think when we want to get right in there, we'll move some stuff and lay the system down. IMNC HQ is quite clogged today because I've been using this room to wrap the Christmas presents and stuff. It is January 1st, by the way, when I'm recording this, so I don't know when the video will go out, but Happy New Year to you all anyway. I'm curious to see what SSD this is. This is a lovely, almost old school by today's standards, Samsung 840. So there we go. I think a reasonable step will be removing the power supply. Because this is a non-modular supply, it is one of the quickest ways to get a lot of stuff out of the way when dismantling this particular computer. Here's our SATA cable that's probably going to go back in the optical drive. It's surprisingly toasty in this case, considering we weren't really doing anything and weren't running the machine that long. I think it's going to be a fair bit more efficient with this newer hardware in here. This was a really efficient build for the time, of course, but you know, 100 watt TDP, even then was pretty up there, you know? But important to remember that you've got your graphics on board, so there's no power hungry graphics card accompanying that CPU. Now I can see there's a fair bit of dust buildup actually in the PSU. We may have to take the PSU apart and get some of that out because we're reusing the supply. We want it to be 100% for the new build. It's not looking too bad. It looks terrible from the back because there's that sheet of plastic that's kind of half over the AC portion of the power supply here. The dust just sits on it, so it looks really bad, but it's not that bad, but still needs a good clean. I was expecting a fair bit more dust in here, actually. There's quite a lot of dust sitting at the bottom of the case, but considering that this is from a home where there are 3 log burning fires and coal, log and coal, this is pretty damn good. And you know, 11 years. So you can see in this shot here that this is one of those slightly wider micro ATX boards. It's quite a big micro ATX board with the 4 RAM slots here. It's a sweet looking board. I like this build. I like this build a lot. Let's remove our RAM and have a look, because this will really take us down memory lane. Wow, there's not a lot of weight in here now. So, wow, here we go. And I think you're gonna have to put up with an IMNC story here for a second, because as I say, this was not the RAM that I purchased for this system originally. This is Patriot Signature DDR3 1333 megahertz, and this came out of my first ever gaming PC from all new parts that I built in 2011 in the NZXT Lexer S case with the Phenom 2. And I believe this was the first component that I bought, because I bought the components in stages as I was saving up. I would save up a little bit, buy a component, save up a little bit, buy a component, and then I put them all together at the end. The memory was the first thing I purchased, I think. And I just really wanted the Patriot Signature RAM. It looked really cool back then. Isn't it funny now, looking at it now, it's just nothing, is it? It's just a couple of heat spreaders. But, you know, at that time it was like, wow, that's cool RAM. It looked really cool. Okay. Yeah, and then that found its way into here, because by the time I built this, I'd already dismantled that system and started selling off the parts. So this hard drive then, I think we're gonna have to take off the other side. Oh, that's on thumb screws as well. Nice. That is convenient. There goes the other side panel. Let's have a little investigation back here. Yeah, we've got some thumb screws holding in this side of the hard drive. I believe this 5¼ to 3½ inch adapter came with the case, I think. Of course, one thing to bear in mind with these little Core 1000, Core 1100 cases is there's 0 space behind the motherboard tray, so it's very much a traditional build. PSU at the top, all of your spare cabling goes in that little gap. And it looks like this is gonna come out the back because we've got no power supply in the way. This is a Seagate, I believe. Yeah, not a lot of people enjoyed the video where I put this drive in because of my whole use a used drive thing. This came from a Skybox or something like that, so people weren't impressed with that, which is fine. We'll put this adapter back in the case when we remove the drive from it. And let's now slide out this optical drive. There we go, there's our optical drive. This is a Sony drive, and I was a big fan of these at the time because they were dirt cheap, and they were very plain looking on the front. You didn't have any white text all over it. A lot of the drives you had like sort of white text. This was very subtle, and it was also a nice flat design. I don't like anything that kind of bows out or has kind of design nuanced stuff going on here. I just like the basic DVD drive, and these Sonys were very nice, as strange as that sounds in these days. So just for ease of cleaning, we'll take out this drive thing, and it won't be used, but we'll of course keep the case intact because you never know what the future might bring. Oh, I forgot about this little one down here. That's how it's held in at the bottom. That's really nifty. Lots of thumb screws on this case. Really nice. Toolless for removing this. I mean, I don't know. I don't know why I hate on this thing so much, but make it toolless to remove this with thumb screws, but then you absolutely need to use a screwdriver to put the drives in. So I don't really understand that bit, but overall, the more thumb screws, the better, I guess. Let's unhook all of this front panel, ready to go back into the next motherboard. I wonder if this case will see a third motherboard, because it is solid. There is nothing wrong with this case at all. I can't see why we would need to buy another case, even when I do the next upgrade on this. Gosh, that one's in there. What is that? That's audio. That's really found its way in there. There we go. Cool. Audio connector. Lovely stuff. Let's get this board out. I would move the new system out of the way, but honestly, there is no room in here at all today. I should have taken some time to tidy my room, but really, I just want to get this computer back. So the sooner I dig in and get it done, the sooner it can go back. I've got the little PC speaker in here as well. Nice. Wow, that is tight as in this case. All our screws are free. How did I get this board in here? Okay, that took a little bit of wangling. There is the old board. Still 100% functional, but just a little too old for what we need. So I just want to see quickly if we can remove the front cover. So I'm pretty sure this case has just a pop-off front cover. I want to get the front cover off because we're going to need to get right in there to clean this up. We are going to have to do a little bit of surgery on this front panel. The foam here, I'm not going to aggravate it too much because we're in this room. But yeah, you can probably see it on the camera there. The foam has deteriorated to the point where it is naturally now breaking apart, which is understandable. So we need to ditch all this foam from in here. I've probably got a random 120mm dust filter I can bung on the front of this, so that's great. But all this original foam we need to get shot of, but I want to do that outside. Question is, how on earth do you pop off this front cover? Ah, brilliant. Hey, there we go. We got it from the top. So yeah, we can give that some attention. So just like magic, we are back with a lovely clean case. You saw me clean up the power supply, which was quite a task. I didn't record the case because that was a little bit interesting to say the least. I don't have any canned air, I don't own a compressor. I really need to get one of those electric air blower things. I might treat myself sometime later this week, possibly, because it's very, very difficult when you're dealing with dust in a computer without one of those. The cans are great, but obviously they're not very economical, and they're just a pain. And if you haven't got one, then you haven't got one, you know. So yeah, but it's come up lovely just using a Hoover. And the other thing I didn't have was a paintbrush. I didn't have a brand new paintbrush to use to get in all the gaps. That works really well, but unfortunately just really low on that kind of thing at the moment. Nevertheless, it's come out really nice, and it's definitely ready for a system to go back into it. It's not perfect. You couldn't put it in a laboratory, but it's definitely good enough for this new hardware to go into the case now. I've got zero concerns. And with the front panel, I did indeed remove all the foam. And as I was cleaning up the front panel, I was kind of thinking about the last clip that I recorded and the way I worded things. If your foam is creating dust when you agitate it, that doesn't necessarily mean that the foam needs replacing or the foam has gone bad. The foam is doing exactly what it's meant to do. It's a dust filter here on the front and it's trapping the dust. So if you agitate it, it's going to release the dust. That's normal. You can vacuum it up from the front and you can get a lot of the dust out of it, but you know when it's about to perish because it goes kind of hard and brittle. So instead of being super soft, you can start to feel it come away in your hands, and you just know that it is going to deteriorate. So if you leave that in there over time, let's say over the next 2 to 3 years perhaps, the foam would start to break apart, and then any small agitation, it would release clumps of it into the system potentially, or at least break down and make a mess in the front panel. So it's nice to just get rid of it. And what I'm going to do instead, I've actually got rid of the intake fan completely. It was absolutely caked in dust. Plus it's been running for 11 years. So I've got 120mm fans knocking around brand new that have got no hours on them. I may as well sling one of those in here. And at the same time, I can pop in a 120mm dust filter, potentially somewhere this side, so it's easy to access now that we haven't got an entire dust filter at the front of the case. So we'll do the fan later on. It's not essential to get the system up and running anyway. Plus, I believe I'm going to need to go up to the attic to find a dust filter. I'm going to try and do this build without ordering anything in. So far, I think we can do it because I just want to get this back really quickly. So if we make a start putting some of this stuff back in, I've got the nice newly cleaned optical drive, and we're going to try and get it flush this time. So pop that back in the top. There we go, that's flush there to the front panel. And we can indeed screw in the front holes here. That's going to be a lot easier. Nice, that is one optical drive in, finally flush. I can't imagine why I didn't do that last time. There must be a reason. Was it a cable thing or something? It can't be, no idea. Anyway, I'm not too sure. But I think next up we can just put the motherboard straight in. We may need to move some standoffs around. I think we will. And I noticed that I didn't even have a standoff in this location when I had the previous board in. So we'll pop one there. And I don't think we're going to need this guy because we're not putting in the giant M80X board. So this guy can come out, I believe. Brand new I/O shield. Still with the lower end boards, you get this, this much kind of cheaper, flimsier I/O shield. But it does the job. There we go, looking good. Right then. Lovely, so there's our board all screwed in. As you can see, the much smaller board fits a lot neater in there. No kind of tight pass here against the 5¼ inch bays like with the previous board. Look at that lovely, neat little system. Everything black, all looking good. I'm going to hook up the front panel and then we'll install the power supply and we'll fire it up, see if we've still got our lovely functional Windows 11 system running just as it was on the bench, but now in the case. Okay, here we go with the test. Let's turn it on first. And let's go for that power button. Lovely, that's brilliant. And I can see, I don't think you guys can see on camera, but I can just about see we have our power light hooked up correctly. Hard drive activity LED is hooked up correctly. Power switch worked. Now all I've got left to try is the reset switch, if I can find it. It's just there. Yes, there we go. Fantastic. So I'm going to give this a test. So last night was actually quite entertaining. Here is the external hard drive that has been around for at least 15 years. I remember purchasing this in Tesco. This is a 500 gig drive and this has been acting as a backup for this PC for all this time, and it had other uses before this PC. And it's actually closer to probably about 18 years, give or take. That's wild. It's a Maxter drive, so yeah, it has indeed died. Now, it was working fine when I plugged it in. Well, I say working fine, it was a little slow and loud, making some various noises like these old drives do. So what I decided to do to put the drive under stress was format it completely, because we now have three copies of all the data. We've got a copy on my server, we've got a copy on this PC because that transfer has finished. That took, you know, like half an hour or so, less than that. And we've got a copy on the old drives, of course, that came out of the other machine. So I was safe to format this and do a fresh backup. So about 10% of the way into the fresh backup, very, very slow, by the way, over USB 2.0, this guy, the drive died. So it just disconnected. It now won't mount, and it just sits there making noises, will not mount. So in a way, I'm glad. It's not often I'm glad about hardware dying, but if we think about this scenario, the drive needs to be reliable enough to, if anything happened to the system, you need to be able to restore all of this data at the same time. So if the drive can't cope with that load of just asking for everything or having everything transferred to it, then it's not up for the job and it won't be able to be used for its intended purpose. So I think the way to go with this, because obviously we've got USB 3.0, I think picking up a nice 500 gig external USB 3.0 little SSD, not a super speedy one, just a cheap but decent quality drive, can probably be had for maybe 30 or 40 quid, and it'll be an excellent replacement for this, and energy saving as well. This probably consumes about 12 watts when it's spun up, whereas a little SSD would be like, you know, 1 or 2 watts plugged into a USB port. So a little bit of an energy saving there as well, and a noise thing. This is quite loud, and of course a more reliable backup as well. So that's the backup situation. Need to get that sorted, but that's not urgent because we have copies of the data, so that can be done in the next couple of weeks. On to more exciting things. I have found a brand new Corsair fan from my stash, so we're going to use this. And I have also found a dust filter. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw the dust filter to the fan, and then I'm going to attempt to use the original clips in the front of the case to clip the fan in place. That way it'll be easy to get to this with a vacuum from the front of the case without disassembling anything. I was toying with the idea of mounting the fan inside, but then you have to pull the side panel off if you want to get to the filter. Plus the filter is then technically on the wrong side of the fan, so it's not really protecting the fan from the dust. So we need 4 fan screws. This filter is one of those nice magnetic ones, really cool. Doesn't help us in the slightest here because it's a plastic front cover and a plastic fan, but still cool. Yeah, the tolerances aren't amazing on this filter because it's not rigid, so I've got to back off those screws slightly to make it fit a little bit better, but that's okay. That's fine. There shouldn't be any audible vibration from that. Let's whip off the front cover and cross our fingers that the clips will support this fan, because it's going to be a slightly different size. The frame is going to be, the frame does look a little bit thicker than the Fractal design one that came out. Okay. Yeah, this fan is too thick for the clips on the front of the case. That isn't a problem because we can just screw it to the case. That's fine. We can screw it to the front of the case. So let's move the cover for now. Do you know what? We can't actually do that for 2 reasons. Firstly, there isn't really clearance. We've got to squash, we've got to mash all this front panel to get this screwed on, because obviously it wasn't really intended to be screwed here. They put the mounts on the front cover. Secondly, this is going to be in the way when we go and put the front cover on. This is going to be in the way. These clips are going to interfere because it's not going to align exactly the same. You could chop these off. These are just plastic, but I don't think that's the right way to go. So new plan, we're going to take the filter back off. We will use the same screws to screw the fan and the filter onto the PC, but we'll put the filter on the outside and we'll put the fan on the inside. And I think that will be a good balance between being able to access the filter and being able to appropriately mount the fan. So it's going to be one of these sort of balancing act ones to get it in place. So yeah, we can place the fan there and we can place the filter here. There's one started. Let's try and get opposite corner, and then being really careful not to trap any of these front panel cables under the fan filter, because this is going to get really, really tight to the case now with this 4th screw in. We could leave this fourth screw out, but we can get to it, so we may as well put it in. There we go. Okay, and what we should be able to do now is just clip the front panel back on. I've done the classic ram the power supply cables into the 5 1/4, so that's why they're all poking out there. Nice. Okay, that's the front panel back on, and now we have the fan inside the machine. So let's plug it in. So I've plugged that into sysfan 2, which is just there at the bottom of the motherboard. There we go, that's quite neat. Let's just power this up and see if we've got airflow. Lovely. So that's bringing our fresh air into the case nicely. Now that we've got a fan in the case, it's more important, much more important to tie some of these back, because if the system is moved around, something could easily get lodged in the blades here, make a horrible racket, or worse, damage some of these more delicate cables. So I'm going to need to tie some of this back. I think getting it up here out of the way is a good idea before we put on that drive panel thing. I did put the 5 1/4 to 3.5 inch adapter back here, so our thumb screws are back in place. So that's nearly everything in, apart from this one panel. That's everything, and that is a lot quieter than the existing. The existing would have lasted, but I don't think it would have done another 10 years. And yes, I could have changed it at some point, but if I've got the spare fans here, we may as well just preemptively change it. Plus the other one was filthy. That is in the firing line. You know, the PC's on the floor. It's been running for 11 years. It's right at the front. The intake filtering is, you know, clogged and not doing its job. It's pulling air in from everywhere, and the fan is just absolutely caked. So it's really nice to put a completely fresh fan in here. I would guess that it would be a lot dirtier if we didn't have the intake on the original build. So if the PSU, if we were doing sort of a negative pressure thing in the case, and we were using the PSU as an exhaust fan, which could be an option for a system like this, it's not going to generate a lot of heat. You could purely rely on the PSU because you have an intake here, and then you can exhaust all the hot air. Obviously not ideal, but if we did that, then it would be a fair bit dustier on the PSU fan, I do believe. But I've got no intentions of adding a rear fan. I'm really happy with the positive pressure approach here, and then the PSU can just carry the rest out. So data's transferred, everything is up and running and working. So the last thing I want to do, pretty much, before we tie things back and put that panel back, I want to run mem test just to make sure. I'm 99% sure we're absolutely fine, but just a couple of passes of mem test just to make sure. And because someone did recommend I do that for my builds, which is, yeah, a really, really valid point. I don't do things like that enough. I don't validate them enough in that kind of way. So we'll do that. So I was all geared up to just get a memtest 86 and make a bootable USB for it. But I came across this program, memtest 64, that runs within Windows. Downloaded it just to give it a go, and it seems to be testing all the RAM and absolutely slamming the system overall. So you can see the, wow, it's slamming it so hard my mouse is stuttering. You can see the CPU is absolutely whacked. 100% utilization, memory is whacked, even giving the disk a really good going over. So I'm just going to let this run. I'm not sure how good this program is in comparison to the standalone version. Well, memtest 86, which is traditionally run standalone. Maybe I'll do that as well, but for now it's kind of cool because we can see that because we're in Windows, we can see really easily that we're slamming everything, which is quite nice. That's when it stopped that last test, or the last test completed, and now it's running another test. So I've set it to just run indefinitely. You can set limits and things. It's nice. It's kind of a cool little tool to slam the system. Oh, do you know what would be really cool as well before we finish up, if I remember to do it? If we run something like this, get everything slammed, and then put this on the power meter to see how much we're drawing from the wall. Because 65 watt TDP, I'd just love to see the whole system, you know, kind of way below 100 watts. Not sure if that's going to be the case, but that would be so cool. Overall, really, really happy with this build. All right, guys, excuse the iPhone clip. I haven't got any space left on my SD card and no time to empty it because I'm in a mega rush. But yeah, the system is done. And I just want to show it to you before I take it back to its home today. So I've got this drive panel back on here, and I've tied all the front panel connectors really neatly with just 2 twist ties and some of the other cables that are flapping about, so they're nice and free from the fan at the front there. So no matter what kind of movement we get, nothing at all is going to interfere with the fan. So another thing that I've quickly done here, just to show you all before we sign off, is sitting at the desktop, I am proud to report that this system consumes a tiny 20 watts. It's around 21, between 20 and 21. So absolutely nothing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly fire up one of these memory tests. So the test is now running and we're starting to see all of the components spike up to 100. So full memory utilization. And we've got full CPU, apologies for these angles, and we've got disk is doing a little bit of activity, swapping in and out as well. That'll increase as the test goes on, I think. And whilst it's doing this, we're pretty much at a full load there. We are sucking only 57, 61, 55, 64, 61. So as you can see, right around that 65 watt TDP. But even with all the other stuff in the case, we are looking really good. You could probably suck maybe 10 watts more juice if we were to put Prime 95 running with some graphic intensive stuff as well, or something like that. But as you can see, this is 100% utilization anyway of the CPU, but the GPU isn't doing anything. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have time to run any more tests, but you can see that the system is nice and efficient. So I'm gonna shove the side panel back on and yeah, get this back. Massive apologies for such a rushed iPhone clip yesterday. This little outro is much more chilled out. I ran out of time basically, but we still managed to do everything we needed to do. So it was all tested, all lovely, all working, and we even measured the power as you just saw. So that's all good. The computer is now in its home and working beautifully. I am chuffed with the build. It is such a nice machine. I could happily use that machine for my own system. It's just really zippy. And I've stripped so much out of Windows 11 and disabled all of the nonsense that it's just kind of a breath of fresh air. It's lovely. So yeah, I think that's going to be a great system for the next several years. And of course, I'm intrigued to see if it's going to last anywhere near the 11 or nearly 12 years that this system lasted. So let's wait and see, I guess. A couple of things before we go. I've got this drive here. I decided to strip apart the external drive, and the enclosure, I've always kind of hated the design of the exterior of the enclosure because it hasn't really got a flat surface for you to put the drive on properly, and it's really slippery, it's got no rubber feet, it's just not really well thought out. But the internals, this is one of the most solid and well-built external hard drives that I've ever taken apart. And it is indeed a SATA drive. I was somewhat expecting an IDE drive. I don't know why. This date code is April 2008, so we didn't buy this quite as early as I thought. I was thinking around maybe 2007, and there was a possibility that it could have been an IDE drive. Plus it had Maxter written on it, and you know, that is a very old name by now. But thinking about it more, I think Maxter stopped production of their own drives prior to 2008. So April 2008 Seagate drive, 500 gig, SATA, nice little drive at the time, and this explains why it's lasted 16 years or so. We purchased in mid to late 2008, so nice bit of kit, it did really well, but of course I'm glad that it's died because I don't want to rely on a 16-year-old hard drive. If I've ever got to recover all that data, it would just be horrible if it exploded, and then, you know, we would have to go to serious measures to try and recover that data from either the internal drive of the system or from the crusty old external. So my plan now is just to put together a nice external NVMe drive. I'll buy a little enclosure and another 500 gig drive, put it together. It can just hang out of a USB 3.0 port and it'll be lovely, completely silent, low power, good backup solution. So that's that build all done. As far as the old system is concerned, I've got it here on the desk, and as you may be able to tell, I've got Linux Mint up and running on it, and I've been playing around with Steam. Today, my network has stopped working on this system. It's not even flashing, so I don't know why that is. It was working fine yesterday. I fired it up just to show you guys that I've got it here on the bench up and running. I installed Linux Mint on this crusty old Toshiba half hanging on its last thread laptop hard drive, and it runs awfully. But I've just been having some fun with this in the evenings. I don't know why. I just don't know what to do with it, really. There's no value with the APU, there's no value in the motherboard, but I am trying to be better about hoarding random junk. I'm trying to clear out all the time. I just want to reduce the amount of stuff that I've got, so I don't really want it hanging around. I'll keep it here for a bit because I'm kind of half tempted to put together some other really random type of build. I just don't know what. So I'll think about that, but I wanted to have a play with it here on the desk anyway because it's quite a unique system. Again, you know, I really like this little generation of APUs. I just think they were really capable. So last but not least, I want to say Happy New Year to you all. The filming of this episode has spanned across New Year's. What are you doing now? Have you just gone to display sleep? Yeah, there it is. It's fine. It's fine. It's all running. Still no network though. No activity lights on that port at all. So 2025, there should be some lovely stuff coming on the channel. 2024 was a fantastic year for IMNC. We kind of rebooted back in February time when we redid IMNC HQ. And we've done some really fun stuff across 2024 and it's been lovely. So I just want to say a big thank you for all the support. I would absolutely love to do more of this YouTube stuff. I'm really enjoying myself and I have recently set up channel memberships. If any of you guys at all are interested in signing up, I've got various tiers that offer some little perks, but it's more just a way of sort of supporting me, allowing me to do this. The more I can get for YouTube, the less I can do of other things. And it may allow me to do some more of this, which I would love to do. So please, if you are interested or if you've been with me a long time and you do have just a tiny couple of quid to spare a month, there are some membership options there for you guys. If you're not interested, absolutely no problem. I've got no interest at the moment of doing any kind of exclusive content or anything like that, so nobody's gonna miss anything if you don't sign up. There's just a couple of little perks on there, early access and stuff on the high end. So please, if you wanna check it out, then all the info is of course on the channel. You've just got to press that little join button. So thank you all for watching and I'll see you in the next episode.